Buongiorno. Welcome to the lesson on forming the passato prossimo. The passato prossimo in English translates to the present perfect, but don't let that confuse you because it's a past tense. It's a past tense that describes things that have happened and have ended. And there's actually 3 translations in English for whatever these events in the past are, and they are either I blanked, okay, I did whatever verb you want to fill in the blank, okay, I blanked, or I did blank, or I have blanked, okay, so those are your 3 options. Whenever you state anything in the passato prossimo, it can mean one of those 3 things. So now let's talk about how to form the passato prossimo. So there's a lot of steps and I don't want this video to be super duper long. So the first step that you're going to do is you're going to look at the verb in the infinitive form and you're going to decide, is it going to take essere or avere as its auxiliary or helping verb? Because in forming the passato prossimo, you're going to have a conjugation of either essere or avere according to the subject of the sentence, and then you're going to have a past participle. So you need those 2 components in order to form the passato prossimo. So looking at the verb right away, you want to identify, does it go with essere or does it go with avere? And this is actually the hardest part about the passato prossimo. So you really need to memorize the verbs that go with essere in the passato prossimo. First of all, the verbs that go with essere in the passato prossimo are called intransitive verbs. And an intransitive verb means that it doesn't take a direct object. So if I say, for example, mangio una pizza is the direct object of the sentence, the what or the who of the sentence. So the verbs that don't have a what or a who of the sentence are called intransitive. So if I say, for example, I'm going to Paris, okay? Vado a Parigi. There's no direct object there. So the verb andare is an intransitive verb. So most of these verbs, these intransitive verbs, are verbs of motion or verbs of lack of motion. But there are a lot of verbs of motion in Italian that actually use avere as the auxiliary verb. So don't let that be your only rule in determining if it goes with essere or avere. The simplest way, I think, to remember the most popular verbs, the most commonly used verbs that go with essere in the past, is to picture a house, okay? So, la casa di essere. So picture this house. It's a small house, and it's not a normal house. You're not going to think of this house in terms of the things that you do in the house, like eating and sleeping and watching TV and all of that. You're going to think of it in terms of really specific things to help you remember these verbs. So the house has 2 doors. So the door here is where people come into the house. So the verbs that have to do with anything about entering or arriving or coming all use essere in the passato prossimo. So numero 1 is entrare, to enter. 2, arrivare, to arrive. 3, tornare, to return. And 4, venire, to come. Va bene? So now picture the other door over here, and these verbs have to do with leaving the house, okay? So il primo qui, the first one here, is andare, to go. Then we've got uscire, to go out, and partire, to depart. Va bene? So 7 verbs down having to deal with the 2 doors. Now picture in the house a girl sitting on a rocking chair, okay? So she's not doing anything, she's staying put. So the verbs that have to do with staying or being are also going to use essere, okay? So we've got stare and essere. Those are both verbs to be. In the passato prossimo, there's only one form, and it's going to use stare as the past participle. So they're going to combine and there's just one verb. So we'll say stare essere is the first verb, to be. The second one we'll say is restare. So you can use that also to stay, okay? And then rimanere, rimanere, to remain. We can also say that we can use two more verbs here just in terms of being without doing anything. Diventare, to become, and crescere, to grow. Va bene? Okay, so now we see a staircase in the house. So then the verb to ascend or go up uses essere, salire, and the verb to go down or descend also uses essere, scendere. Upstairs there's a room. There's a baby that's just been born in a little crib. So the verb to be born also uses essere, nascere. And then out behind the house is a cemetery, which so many houses have, right? I know this is a funny picture to paint, but it will really help you remember these verbs if you can picture this scene, okay? So out in the cemetery, then the verb to die, morire, also uses essere. Va bene? These are the verbs, the most common verbs that use essere. Another common verb that uses essere is piacere, the verb to be pleasing. So when you say something was pleasing to you in the past, you're going to use essere always, not avere. Anytime you use a reflexive verb, which we are going to get to in another chapter, you're also going to use essere in the passato prossimo. All reflexive verbs, always. And then there's other verbs that are impersonal that will use essere to, like costare, to cost, capitare, to happen, succedere, to happen, verbs like that as well. And verbs involving changes of states of being, like to lose weight, for example, dimagrire, or to gain weight, ingrassare. Those are going to use essere as well. So now you know the most important verbs, the most common verbs that use essere. So that means that all other verbs are going to use avere in the passato prossimo. So way more verbs use avere in the passato prossimo. So that was your first step. Identify whether the auxiliary verb is going to be essere or avere. Step number 2 then is to conjugate. Once you've identified essere or avere, conjugate that verb according to the subject of the sentence. So you have to have essere and avere memorized in order to form the passato prossimo. And if you haven't, you need to do that. Just drill yourself repeatedly so it's just in your head and you don't have to think about it when you're wanting to say something in this tense. So let's review the forms of, first of all, essere, all the conjugations, va bene? Rivedete, okay? Io sono, tu sei, lui, lei è, noi siamo, voi siete, loro sono. And then the conjugations of avere, io ho, tu hai, lui, lei ha, noi abbiamo, voi avete, loro hanno. Benissimo. So that step is number 2, conjugate essere or avere. Don't think about them in terms of forming the passato prossimo as a literal translation. It's just one of the components in forming the tense. The third step then is that you're going to take the verb in the infinitive and you're going to form a past participle out of the infinitive. There's a rule to do this, okay? And the rule is if it's an are verb, the are ending changes to atto. So if we have, for example, the verb ballare, the past participle is ballato. If it's an ere verb, the ere ending changes to utto. So, per esempio, the verb ricevere, the past participle is ricevuto. And then the ire verbs, ire changes to ito. So the verb finire, the past participle is finito. I know you got that. Molto bene. Bravi. So that's it. That's the rule. The problem here, though, is that there are many irregular past participles which you just have to memorize. Most of them come from the ere verb group, okay? So, per esempio, leggere, is the past participle is not leggiuto, it's letto. And scrivere, it's not scrivuto, it's scritto. Prendere is not prenduto, it's preso. So most of them come from the ere verb group, but there are some that end in are that are irregular, like fare, fatto has two T's, and some from the ire verb set. Dire, per esempio, is detto, that's the past participle. So that's the third step. The fourth step only happens if you're using essere as the auxiliary verb, and what you're going to do is you're going to take the end of the past participle and you're going to make it agree with the subject. So if the subject is a woman, the past participle is going to end in an a. So this follows the same rules as that we have been using for nouns and adjectives, where there's 4 choices of endings for the nouns and adjectives that are ending in O in the masculine singular form. So if it ends in A in the feminine singular form, it's going to end in E for the feminine plural form. It's going to end in O for the masculine singular form, and it's going to end in I for the masculine plural form. And remember that the masculine plural form means that you're talking about either a group of guys or a group of girls and guys. You have all the rules down now, so for forming the passato prossimo. So let's start with avere first, because avere is easier, okay? Because the past participle ending never changes. So let's take the verb mangiare, okay? And I want to say that I ate, va bene? So we know it goes with avere because it's not in that house, la casa di essere. So you conjugate the io form of avere, so that's o, and then the are, mangiare, past participle is mangiato. So to say I ate is ho mangiato, ho mangiato. And remember, you don't have to include that subject pronoun in front of the phrase. If you do include it though, for emphasis, it's going to go right in front of the conjugation of avere. Io ho mangiato. So now a verb that goes with essere in the past, andare, is used very commonly, andare, to go. So if I want to say that I went, so we know it goes with essere, so you're going to conjugate the io form of essere, which is sono, and then you're going to take that past participle, andato, and you're going to make it agree with me, one woman. Okay, so the ending is going to be a. So you're going to say sono andata. Sono andata is I went. If it was a man that was saying it, they would say sono andato. Okay? If it was a group of women saying that they went, they would say siamo andate. And if it was a group of men saying we went, they would say siamo andati. Siamo andati. You have to think a little bit more about what you're doing there when you use essere. So now you have all the steps in forming the passato prossimo. So let's talk about the verb piacere. It's a little confusing in the past tense. If you're not familiar yet with piacere, I recommend that you go and watch my video on YouTube about piacere, because I'm not going to go into detail about the indirect object pronouns or disjunctive pronouns that are used in that phrase. But you do have to use them. So the components are the form of piacere and an indirect object pronoun or disjunctive pronoun. So when you do it in the past tense, in the passato prossimo, you're going to insert that passato prossimo form right in the middle of the indirect object pronoun and the past participle of piacere. And the past participle of piacere is irregular. It's piaciuto. Piaciuto, okay? So you're either going to be saying something was pleasing to me or things were pleasing to me. So there's only 2 forms that you're going to use of essere, either e or sono. E is going to be used with singular nouns and verbs, and then sono is going to be used with plural nouns. And then the ending of piaciuto is going to agree with whatever the noun is that you're talking about. If it's a verb in the infinitive, it's just going to end in o. Let me give you some examples now because that's a lot of information. So if I want to say, dancing pleased me, okay, you're going to say, mi è piaciuto ballare. Mi è piaciuto ballare. So literally it's dancing, if you go from the end, dancing was pleasing to me. And so è piaciuto is agreeing with ballare. Ballare is an infinitive, so it stays in the singular masculine ending of piaciuto. So now if I want to say, you liked pizza, okay? Ti è piaciuta la pizza. Ti è piaciuta la pizza. So now we're going backwards. We're saying pizza, the pizza was pleasing to you. And the piaciuta agrees with la pizza. Okay? Does that make sense? So now we want to say, gli sono piaciuti I ravioli. Gli sono piaciuti I ravioli. The ravioli were pleasing to him. Sono, because ravioli are plural, and piaciuti ending in I, because it agrees with I ravioli. Va bene? So those are the forms that you're going to use of piacere. Either è or sono, and then the ending variable based on the noun that you're talking about. Okay, got this? So now I'll give you some phrases for time frames in the past. So many times when you're talking about using the passato prossimo, you're going to say yesterday or 2 hours ago or last week or last year or something like that. So these are going to be very useful. So the word for yesterday is ieri. The day before yesterday, l'altro ieri. And I hope you're repeating this after me at home, okay? So if you want to say something beyond the day before yesterday, you can take the number of days and then you can use fa, which is ago. Fa, if you've been studying Italian for a while, you know it's a conjugation also of fare, it means does or makes, and it's also used for weather. So in this case, it means something different. It means ago. So if I want to say 4 days ago, I would say 4 giorni fa. 4 giorni fa. If I want to say 10 days ago, 10 giorni fa. Va bene? So I can also use fa to describe other time frames, like a month ago, a year ago, a week ago. So I can say un mese fa, a month ago, or un anno fa, a year ago, or una settimana fa, a week ago. Okay? So notice how I use the indefinite article with all of those nouns there. Una settimana, un mese, un anno, it translates to a whatever ago. So you can also use fa in terms of things, hours and minutes, like 5 minutes ago, 5 minuti fa, 5 minuti fa, or 6 hours ago, 6 ore fa, 6 ore fa, va bene? So another word that you could use to create time frames in the past is an adjective, scorso. It means last. So scorso is going to follow the noun and it's going to agree with the noun. So if I want to say last week, I would say la settimana scorsa because it has to agree with settimana. If I want to say last year, l'anno scorso. If I want to say last month, il mese scorso. So you can somewhat use fa and scorso interchangeably, like un mese fa and il mese scorso, but you can never use scorso with times having to do with a number. Like you could never say 5 minutes with scorso. You have to say 5 minutes ago with fa. Va bene? So great. Now let me give you a couple of sentences and see if you can, let's form the passato prossimo together. So the verb that we're going to use, and for the sake of this video right now, I'm just going to stick with all verbs that have regular past participles. So the first verb we're going to use is the verb guardare, okay? And I want to say the form of tu, okay? So you're gonna say, you watched TV, okay? You, one person. So come si dice? So remember all of those steps that we went through and go through those 4. Sometimes you only need 3 steps when you're conjugating with avere as the auxiliary verb. So tu and guardare. Think about it. And watch TV. Hai guardato la TV. Hai guardato la TV. Va bene? Ok, la prossima. We returned. Just we returned. And the we refers to a group of all girls. Siamo tornate. Siamo tornate. So tornare, remember, is in that casa di essere with the door returning. See? Okay, un altro. They received a package. They received a package. The verb is ricevere. In the subject is loro. Hanno ricevuto un pacco. Hanno ricevuto un pacco. Va bene? E l'ultima, the last one for now, we'll say, I departed for Venice. And the I in this case is a woman. Sono partita per Venezia. Sono partita per Venezia. Because remember, partire was also in that casa di essere. See? Okay, benissimo. So, see you in the next video. Ciao!